A serious security flaw in Palo Alto Networks' firewalls is being actively exploited in the wild, according to the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. The firewall's operating system, Pan-Os, contains a problem, Cve-2022-0028, with a CVSS severity level of 8.6, that could allow a remote threat actor to utilize the firewalls to launch distributed denial of service (DDoS) attacks against targets of their choosing without authenticating. Attackers may be able to hide their identity and whereabouts by taking advantage of the situation. The Palo Alto Networks advisory published earlier this month states that the DDoS attack would appear to originate from a Palo Alto Networks PA series, hardware, VM series, virtual, and CN series, container, firewall against an attacker's specified target. The good news, according to Phil Neri, Vice President of Cyber Defense Strategy at Garden Ops, is that this vulnerability does not provide attackers access to the victim's internal network. The bad news is that it may stop business-critical functions, including accepting orders and responding to customer support inquiries, at other targets. Contrary to popular belief, he points out that those attacks aren't solely carried out by insignificant nuisance actors. DDoS has been employed in the past by adversary groups like CAP28 against the World Anti-Doping Agency. An incorrectly configured URL filtering policy is the cause of the problem. A non-standard configuration puts instances at risk according to the alert. An attack requires a firewall configuration that must have a URL filtering profile with one or more blocked categories assigned to a security rule with a source zone that has an external-facing network interface, widely exploited. In the 2 weeks since that disclosure, CISA claimed to have observed the issue being used in the wild by cyber adversaries and to have added it to its list of known exploited vulnerabilities. Kev, attackers can use the weakness to launch DDoS floods that are both reflected and magnified. The market for flaws that may be used to enable those attacks is growing, according to Bud Bromhead, CEO of Viku. The ability to use a Palo Alto Networks firewall to perform reflected and amplified attacks is part of an overall trend to use amplification to create massive DDoS attacks. He says, Google's recent announcement of an attack which peaked at 46 million requests per second, and other record-breaking DDoS attacks will put more focus on systems that can be exploited to enable that level of amplification. The speed of weaponization follows the trend of cyber attackers using freshly reported vulnerabilities more quickly, but it also suggests that threat actors are becoming more interested in less serious problems. Terry Olaz, Director of Sales Engineering at Skybox Security, stated in an email that too often, our researchers see organizations move to patch the highest severity vulnerabilities first based on the CVSS, and cybercriminals have learned to use vulnerabilities viewed as less vital to carry out their assaults since they are aware of how many businesses manage their cybersecurity. The sheer volume of patches that are released in a single month, however, makes patch prioritization a problem for businesses of all shapes and sizes. IT teams must prioritize and assess hundreds of vulnerabilities, frequently with little information. Additionally, Skybox Research Lab recently discovered that in 2022, the number of new vulnerabilities that were eventually exploited in the wild increased by 24%. As Roger Grimes, data-driven defense advocate at KnowBe4, tells Dart Reading, any vulnerability that CISA warns you about, if you have in your environment, you need to patch now, and the Kev lists all the vulnerabilities that were used by any real-world attacker to attack any real-world target. Great service. And it isn't just full of Windows or Google Chrome exploits. I think the average computer security person would be surprised about what's on the list. It's full of devices, firmware patches, VPNs, DVRs, and a ton of stuff that isn't traditionally thought of as being highly targeted by hackers. It's time to patch and check for compromises. The following versions have patches for the recently discovered Pan-Os bug. 8.1.23H1 Pan-Os Pan-9.0.16H3 OS Pan-9.1.14H4 OS Pan-10.0.11H1 OS Pan-10.1.6H6 OS Pan-10.2.2H2 and all subsequent Pan-Os versions for firewalls in the PA, VM, and CN series. Organizations should ensure they have solutions in place capable of quantifying the business impact of cyber risks into economic impact, Olas stated, in order to ascertain whether the harm has already been done. He added, this will also help them identify and prioritize the most critical threats based on the size of financial impact. Among other risk analyses such as exposure-based risk scores, they must also enhance the maturity of their vulnerability management programs to ensure they can quickly discover whether or not the vulnerability impacts them and how urgent it is to remediate.